What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. The jig is up. The writing is on the wall for Joe Douglas. And to be honest, it felt like this was the case back when Robert Saleh was fired. But to get into the report and the rumor here, according to U Stadium, Joe Douglas has already been looking at real estate in Baltimore, which is where I guess at this time they would expect him to rejoin in terms of finding new work back in their front office. And honestly, I thought maybe this would be the case where he would end back up in Philly instead, his most recent success. But, and then of course being closer, to relatively closer to just being in the East Coast, so there's not much uplifting, etc. But looks like he wants to return to his roots, and I can't blame him, right? What I was alluding to earlier, and the fact that it felt like this has been the case for a long time, is that this isn't about him getting fired or him quitting on the team, right? His contract is up. He would have needed to prove something tremendous this year in order to earn himself an extension. And at least on paper and projection wise and all that kind of stuff, it seemed like that could work out in his favor. Being paired up with Robert Saleh, when you want to go back to just the initial beginning phases of everything, seemed like these two would be a pairing. Thought about building teams together in the same manner and seemed like they had a pretty good collaborative spirit together. Just never really panned out in their favor. But with Joe Douglas, it feels like Woody Johnson really pulled off. And with him being an owner, sounds crazy to say this, but he really had his own coup d'etat here, because when Woody fired Robert Saleh, according to the rumors and sources that I saw, he never spoke with Joe Douglas at all. And that, it doesn't get any more severe than that, right? When the boss just skips right over you, it means they value your opinion zero, right? There's nothing you can say that's going to sway them one way or the other, so why even have the conversation? And then you look at the previous moves based on that. They didn't want to even improve the roster or look at securing players that they acquired earlier in the offseason until they got rid of Robert Saleh, and he was no longer impressionable on the team. You had all of the hoopla about him being walked out by security, him not being allowed to speak to the other coaches and or players, and it just wasn't really a great look whatsoever. And at this point, is different from trying to fire Joe Douglas early, just because there's still going to be a lot of things that he can try to manage and set up, I guess, for the next person when it comes to cap issues, roster movements, etc. But I look at the fact that, going back to Woody and his coup here, Devontae Adams didn't happen until after Robert Saleh, and I can't say the trade capital that we gave up was insane for him, but the contract obviously wasn't easily absorbable. He's also an aging guy, even if he is a superstar. And then you throw on the fact that you're putting in a third rounder after we've already been giving up a ton of day two capital in hopes of really perking up this roster. And then you have the Hassan Reddick contract situation, right? And Joe Douglas, at least in one of the few moves I think many of us agreed with, even if the initial beginning piece of it was dumb, right? Acquiring him to begin with without having something more secure in place, regardless of everything that we've kind of learned or unlearned in between. And then, of course, Hassan Reddick is rumored to not even want to, he's going to end up leaving the team anyways, right? But what I mean by that is, with Hassan Reddick, I don't think Joe Douglas himself would have ever caved into those demands this season. He would have let it rode out this entire year, and contract tolls, it is what it is. Woody Johnson really seemed to force the issue, right? And we've seen all the rumors and sources, etc., about him really kind of putting his foot down and forcing this deal to get done. So all of that, pretty frustrating as it is. But yeah, where do we go from here, right? It's not an unexpected news. It's not unexpected news from the standpoint that there was a legit chance that he was going to return, especially with the record that we're looking at. But all this means is that we really should be game planning. We really should be preparing for how are we going to conduct the search for a new GM and a new head coach What is the reporting structure going to look like? And how do we go about successfully interviewing and trying to get some of these high-level candidates that we're waving a white flag, right? Surrender on the field. The politics of everything, the visuals just don't look great. So perception-wise, you're already looking at an uphill battle when it comes to bringing people in. There's two things that can help probably turn stuff around immediately. One, a president of football operations, and we've heard some rumors like John Gruden potentially being a candidate for a position as such, and then nailing the GM position. And I think, when you want to talk about from top-down structures, just in the normal sense of it, we have to nail the GM before we get anybody else, right? If you get a solid GM that has also, again, CEO factors and stuff, and you can get into we can get into the particulars later, but you really want a guy that has been in a successful environment, that understands and is aware of how to identify coaching talent. I think that's where we've gone wrong more often than not, is that we get a head coach, or we have, even to certain degrees, a coordinator on one side of the ball or the other that we feel really comfortable with is showing to have acceptable levels of success, if not performing above. And the other side of the ball ends up failing. And more often than not, it's been offensively with us. So I want a GM that is not only forward thinking, but he can also look at the current landscape of candidates, and he can tell this is the personality and the identity that we need for New York. One, who matches that. Two, who can continue to evolve as we acquire talent and as we look to make certain moves that can best help fit this team, right? Next year isn't a season that I want to just be thrown away because we're in the course of another rebuild again. I want it to be one where we can at least say we're going to be a competitive team. It might look like us having a 7-10 record or something like that, depending on what happens with Rodgers, but ultimately, we're fighting tooth and nail, right? Kind of give me the Dan Campbell speech. We're biting kneecaps. We're putting boots in behinds here. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm going to continue diving into the GM series for you guys. So we'll have a little bit of a deep dive into who some of these guys are that we may potentially be able to draw in. And then, of course, we're still looking at head coaches. But let me know what you think about this whole thing. Again, I don't think this is catching anybody by surprise. But let me know your thoughts, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.